Hi.
Welcome to Drinks and Dystopia, the podcast, bringing you sci-fi realness. We've been watching a lot of RuPaul.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything is realness.
Everything is realness, yeah. Bringing you fantasy, unreal realness.
If you've not seen RuPaul, this will mean
It's
nothing.
all wasted and lost on you.
Drinks Dystopia.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
What are you drinking?
Rosé.
We're drinking the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
Fifth leg rosé.
Nice. Well, I say nice, cheap is what I mean.
Well, no, it was expensive, but on sale.
Well, again, expensive. I suppose expensive to us, but not for anyone who ever drinks wine.
It's like £7.
Yeah, we're like, Jesus. Not made of money.
Backtrack corner.
Mm-hmm.
You told me the day after we posted this podcast that you had a backtrack.
Oh, yeah. I said that Richard Lewis had come up with the joke, the mother of all something. I was like, no, that's not Richard Lewis. That was actually Saddam Hussein, I think, came up with that.
What?
Yeah, I think Saddam Hussein came up with
What
the
are you
phrase.
talking? I'm going to dog ear this part of this podcast right now and say that next week you're going to be backtracking
About Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein came up with the mother of all joke.
Yeah, I think he said the mother of all battles or something. It was the first time anyone used that. I think Saddam Hussein came up with that.
This is like Kim Jong-il thinking he's seen a unicorn.
So my backtrack, it contains a possible backtrack. But yeah, like he said that, but of course he didn't. He made the whole from hell. He said mother-in-law from hell joke, and he said
hell.
from hell
So
joke.
anytime you
Richard
use
Lewis.
from hell at the end of something, he thinks he did that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just, after a few drinks and not thinking quickly enough, I got it the wrong way around. I mistook Richard Lewis for Saddam Hussein. Easily done. Similarities are uncanny.
What a mistake to make it. I don't cut that.
What?
I don't know. What's your creature feature for this week?
Well, I suppose it could be related to last week's one, which is where I talked about black cats, didn't I?
I feel like your creature feature is always themed to the week before. So
Right.
last week we were talking about creatures that all look the same. So mimics.
Yeah. Ah, okay, yes. So, I see. Okay, this has gone full circle. I get it. Right. Okay. So my creature feature is it's related to sort of mythology as well.
Okay.
Is the changeling.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of the changeling?
No, I don't think I have.
No, you haven't. Are you sure? So the
Is it a Welsh myth?
Oh my god! It is. It is a Welsh. It's a myth from across the British Isles. But my favourite part about the changeling is from Wales. So the changeling, for those of you who are not up to speed with your ancient Celtic mythology, is a creature that would replace your baby. So a newborn baby would suddenly become really ugly, and it would be abusive and would scream and cry and bite.
Be a baby.
Be a baby, essentially. Just
How
be
dare
a moderately
a baby.
badly behaved baby. And people would say, well, that's the reason why you've seen this change in behaviour is because that's not your baby. Your baby has been replaced by a changeling disguised as your baby.
Tell me more.
So, one way to find out if your baby was a changeling...
I'm going to guess. Wait, I'm going to predict this is going to be
Okay.
a really logical, sensible way of deciding if a creature is taking over your baby.
You would be absolutely wrong in
Shocking.
thinking that.
I'm shocked.
What the one method that they had for, which is, I mean, it's if you think about it, it makes sense, would be to put your baby in the oven, and if the baby
was delicious.
then, well, yeah, if the baby would scream and shout and be like, "Take me out of the oven," it was probably a changeling. It wasn't
Wait,
a
how
baby.
old are the babies? Oh, I see. So the baby can't talk. So if it talks to get out of the oven.
Tanya, that's how you find out. If it talks, it's not a baby, is it?
So your babies from a few weeks ago that would cry out of the womb to not be eaten.
They'd be fine.
They'd be fine?
Yeah, because they would be able to say, as they're being changed by a changeling, "Help me a changeling," or something like that.
I love your baby voice. Okay.
But yeah, so that's what a changeling was. But the best way to get rid of a changeling was, and this is my favourite part of the myth, comes from Wales. And the Welsh, obviously, us being a savvy group of people, came up with a way to trick the changeling. So what the Welsh said was, what you do if you want to catch a changeling is you cook a family meal in an eggshell.
Oh, I don't understand.
No, well, you see.
I don't understand what this means.
That's crazy, isn't it? That's crazy. So what does the changeling do when he sees that? He goes, that's crazy, that is. And he jumps out the cot and he runs up this chimney and runs away because that's crazy. Why would somebody cook their dinner in an eggshell?
But there's a link and a step here that I'm missing.
Yeah.
Does the person say, so tonight, family, I'm going to cook dinner and I'm going to cook it in an eggshell? And the changeling is like, don't be mad, and leaves. Or do they cook the dinner in an eggshell? Because I don't understand how I do that. And if it's my baby's life that matters, I need to understand them.
I think just you attempting to cook a meal in an eggshell is enough to piss the changeling off.
What if the family meal is a boiled egg?
Good point.
Maybe the only meal you can
maybe don't do that one if you're trying to trick the changeling. But the changeling, and the best thing about this is the changeling actually has a little phrase that he says before he leaves. So he doesn't just go and leave.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, he actually has a little thing he says, and this is like recorded, as he'd say, "I saw the acorn before the oak, but I've never seen anything like this."
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
I feel like you can do better.
Do you reckon I can do that?
I feel like a creature in a baby's body has a different voice.
Doesn't quite speak like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the changeling would say,
I've seen the acorn before the oak, but I've never seen anything like this.
And out he goes, runs out the house. Something along those lines?
I couldn't have wished for more.
Yeah. So that's the story of the changeling. So everyone out there who's just had a new baby, congratulations. But put it in the oven. Make sure it's not a changeling, because that's the last thing you want.
This is the internet. People will do what you say.
Well,
do not put your baby in the oven. It's
if you want
Welsh
a changeling,
madness.
if you want a changeling, then
no.
fine.
Just cook a meal in an eggshell first. See how that goes, and if you're still
unsure,
go to
then
a doctor.
Then put it in it.
No. Go to a doctor.
Okay.
Then
put it in the oven.
No, then just bring up a changeling. Don't put anything in the oven.
No ovens involved.
Changelings are creatures too.
How does a doctor diagnose changeling though? Surely the doctor's just going to be like, do you suspect changeling? Yeah, right. Put your oven on.
Medical oven.
Right. Okay. Medical oven. Yeah. Just all I know is if you want to catch this changeling, you need to preheat to 220 degrees.
And just freak him out. Just put him near.
Yeah.
Surely that would be enough.
Just
for the changeling to jump out your baby.
So you just need to make the changeling believe that he's going to go in the oven. So you start looking through a cookbook called Delicious Ways to Cook a Changeling.
Like The Simpsons.
Yeah, something like that. And you read it in front of the baby, like really obviously. Yeah. Okay, I get it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a foolproof plan.
This
here.
can't fail. So
I love the Irish have leprechauns. The Scottish have unicorns, and we have changelings. It's so shitty.
Well, do you mean it can transform into a baby? That's pretty cool. I mean, okay, I get what you're saying. Compared to a leprechaun, which has
gold,
creates rainbows or whatever they
cereal,
do.
Beautiful cereal.
Yeah, it's not quite in that league, but ours is real. Whereas leprechauns are just something they made up.
Well, I like it.
Yeah.
But because this is creature feature, I actually have some features to recommend to people.
Oh, okay.
We did speak about this once, that this is what we do with this feature. We do both things. And normally, I just forget to suggest things. But this week I found 2 amazing new podcasts that everyone needs to go and listen to.
Yeah.
Once they finish listening to ours.
Yeah.
Don't jump off this one and go to them.
If you're still listening now, bloody hell.
One, if you like crime podcasts, which I'm freaking addicted to.
Yeah, I've never got into them. I haven't listened to one yet, so that might be part of the problem.
Might be part of it. I need to know what to do in every possible situation. So now...
Yeah, but you say that, and I saw how you reacted when we had a spider on the sofa.
They haven't covered that in crime podcasts.
No, it's not come up yet?
No, the murderous spiders haven't taken an episode or 2. Well, this podcast is called Done Disappeared. It's really funny, and it's a spoof. It's just like a rip-off of all the crime podcasts. So if you listen to crime podcasts, you'll love this one. It's really short. Each episode's like 10 minutes long. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
Everyone should go and listen to it.
Okay.
And the other one is called Show Me the Meaning. And I've been going on and on to you about this. And it is 3 guys who talk about the philosophy and in-depth look at like the story behind films. So it's kind of like what I wish we were doing, but like they're actually doing.
Oh, okay, I see.
More comedy, more nuance.
Yeah. So they're doing what we wish we could do.
Yeah.
Right. Brilliant. Thanks. Thanks for advertising someone else's podcast that's doing our stuff better than us.
But that's my feature.
Yeah. Well, there you are then. As long as you put it in a feature.
Okay. Well, I got a mini question for you.
Okay.
Is the worst sci-fi or fantasy film you've ever seen?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think I know mine, and I think you might have the same as me.
Go on. What's your one then?
The one with John Travolta and the Scientology.
Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield Earth may be one of the worst sci-fis I've ever seen.
Oh, I know what you mean.
But
I love that movie.
What are you talking about? This is the worst film.
It definitely falls into the category of so bad it's good.
Oh, well,
definitely.
I suppose it could, but if you don't, it's a film. Basically, it's kind of a backstory of Scientology, isn't it? It's an L. Ron Hubbard film.
It's an L. Ron Hubbard sci-fi story,
and it's John Travolta hamming it up. His eyebrows.
A wonderful performance.
It is, and it's just awful. Everything about it.
If
humans learn to fly. This is meant to be set like far in the future.
Literally, cavemen. Fly.
They in like 10 minutes they learn how to be jet fighter pilots.
Yeah, with jets that haven't flown in like 2,000 or 3,000 years. Yeah. And a caveman just gets in and flies it.
You're selling it. Yeah. Sounds great.
No, it's don't get me wrong. As far as story and filmmaking techniques and any way you want to judge this movie, it's a disaster.
Okay.
But when you put all of that together, it just becomes, it's like The Room, isn't it? Like The Room is the worst movie ever made, probably, and yet it's just you can't stop watching it. And Battlefield Earth is the same.
Hi, Lisa.
I think the worst sci-fi I've ever seen, it has to be boring, I think, which is the worst thing a sci-fi can be, is boring.
A worst thing a film can be is boring. Which is very, very themed to today's...
Oh, is it really?
Yes. So,
okay.
So that is quite a good point. So go on, what's
What's the worst sci-fi I've ever seen?
What about Cloverfield Paradox? You watched that on Netflix the other day.
Oh, holy shit. Yes, maybe. It's up there. The Cloverfield Paradox is one of the worst sci-fis I have ever seen. It was boring. It was nonsensical. It thought it was clever, and it just isn't at all.
And there was no paradox, apparently.
There was no paradox?
I didn't see this, but Lee and his brother watched it, and I could just hear them going, "What?" the whole time.
Yeah, there was no paradox, really. It was... Wow. Yeah. Cloverfield Paradox was terrible.
But not so bad, it's good. Just bad.
No, probably the worst sci-fi-ish, I don't know if you count it as sci-fi, is Transformers 2, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to disagree with you, but what you need to understand if you're listening to this is that the Transformers is near and dear to Lee's heart.
Yeah, very much so.
He is a Transformers kid. Like, I was a Disney kid, you are, and Rainbow Bright kid, and you were
Transformers.
Optimus Prime. Lee and his brother have the exact same birthday. Can you tell this story? I love this story.
Well, it's just that he was born on my 5th birthday, and I remember, so the night before my birthday, my mum was rushed into hospital, and my dad said, your mum's having a baby, you've got to go stay at your friend's house. So I stayed at my friend's house, woke up the next morning, my 5th birthday, and there's a present waiting for me, and I opened it up, tore it apart, and it's Optimus Prime.
Optimus Prime.
Like, it's the only thing I wanted in the world. Probably the best gift I've ever received. I had Optimus Prime. Later that day, my dad picked me up from school, and he said, "Lee, it's your birthday. I've got another present for you." And what I assumed was obviously going to be Megatron.
Megatron.
Yeah,
the only possible
that's what he's
thing.
going to do. And instead, he showed me this basket with a slug with a face in it, and he said, "This is your little brother." And I was like, "What? Does he transform into a gun like Megatron? If he doesn't, what is he doing here?" So yeah, that was.
Did you ever get that Megatron?
I never got Megatron. I can't believe it.
You did get every other He-Man
I got
Transformers toy.
Yeah, I got everything else, but I never got Megatron. No, I lie. I did get Megatron. Yeah, I did get Megatron. But
Maybe he was a changeling.
yeah, bloody hell! I've never thought of putting him in the oven.
We've looped it right round.
I never thought of putting him in the oven.
Maybe he would have transformed if you put him in the oven.
Maybe that's what my childhood was missing. Let's just say, to get back on track, Transformers 2 might be the worst sci-fi. It might be the worst movie ever made, because The Room and stuff like that, and Battlefield Earth and
Didn't ruin your
Plan 9
childhood.
for Outer Space, they're all bad, and yet they're still good. Transformers 2 is just rotten.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this week's New World Rule. This is a bit different from what we've done before,
Yeah.
but I realised...
Oh, will this one be interesting, or...?
Talking about boring films.
Yeah.
Recently, Netflix brought out a new film starring your favourite, Will Smith,
Oh, Wilhelm Schmidt, yes.
called Bright.
Oh, yes.
So when I heard what Bright was about, for those of you who don't know, Bright is meant to be, it's kind of a cop film in the modern era, so like in the 2010s or whatever, but the world that it's set in is meant to be kind of a Lord of the Rings world that has evolved through the ages, isn't it, until it's come to our age
To modern
now.
day.
So what you're meant to be watching is a world where there's, like, the story is an orc policeman is hanging out with a human, but there's also elves and there's centaurs in the back you see sometimes. Like, it's this magical world. But the problem is, like, that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that sounds really, really interesting. Like, it's so hard to mess something up when you can have really fun world building, I think.
Mhm.
You can have a shit film, but if the world building's good, I'll forgive it. But this film was so boring that I didn't even watch the end. And it's very rare I don't watch the end of a film.
Yeah.
So I thought, what we could do today is we are going to build this world.
Right.
So if you haven't seen this, it's just our world. He's done nothing. He put some people in some costumes, and that's literally it, isn't it? Like, he doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep saying
it's
he, and
terrible.
what I'm talking about is, how would you say that? David A. Ara? How would you say that name? That's
Yeah. David Ayer. probably.
David A, the director. Now, you might have seen this on my piece of paper.
No.
Do you know what other classic David A has directed?
I do not know David Ayer or Ayer. Probably Ayer. I don't know anything that he's done. What has David done? I'm sure there's going to be a long and illustrious list of cinematic masterpieces.
Well, there's going to be one, because I didn't research past this one, because I did not care past this
Oh,
one.
okay.
He made Suicide Squad.
Ugh. How predictable. Yeah.
That's the most snobby thing you've ever... Ugh. How predictable.
Oh.
You've been watching too much RuPaul.
I'm appalled. Mm.
So, again,
What a shady bitch.
you might guess from our voices we didn't like Suicide Squad either, but
No.
yeah, so I want us to dissect this world and what would actually happen if Lord of the Rings was left to its own devices to evolve into our modern day world.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's been a while since I saw Bright, so I can't exactly, and it's so banal.
But that's why you don't need to watch it again or remember, because
Yeah.
it's literally, there's nothing.
It's terrible. It's really, really bad.
Well, I also did find out that he didn't hire a scriptwriter for this film.
So what, the director he wrote it as well?
I think so,
So
yeah.
he wrote and directed. Just awful.
I think he wrote Training Day though, and that's a great film.
Really?
I think so. I'll probably need to backtrack that next week. But
Yeah.
I very
Have a little look on it.
I'll
We're
read you
cheating
his-
here, but let's have a look
I'm
at his
gonna have a look at his
filmography,
filmography.
because while you're looking up his filmography, I'll give a short, sharp review of Bright.
Okay.
Not a review. I'll just some general thoughts. It's yes, it's so boring. It's just a movie. It's the same movie. It's End of Watch. If any of you've seen the movie End of Watch, imagine End of Watch, but with Will Smith playing every character Will Smith's ever played in his career, because he can only do one type of acting and one character ever. And his partner is just a guy, sort of slightly comedic. Oh,
He
go on.
directed End of Watch.
Did he really?
He directed End of Watch. I'm
Holy
looking at it right
shit.
now.
Holy shit,
He
okay.
just made the same film again.
He made the same movie He made the same movie twice.
I can't believe that.
But the worst thing is, though, End of Watch is pretty good.
And he wrote Training Day, and he also wrote Fast and the Furious.
Oh, fuck.
But a lot of people like Fast and the Furious, so it's
Yeah, but, a lot of people liked Hitler for a while. That's no excuse.
I'm gonna stop you here, because I don't want this to be about
the film, yeah.
I don't, because, the film, you can watch it and think what you want. But the point is, I don't think that the thing it was meant to do, it did. Like,
No.
it's not, it was meant to build a world from Lord of the Rings to the future, and I just think that, so let's look at that. So you've got a world, let's say you go from a point where everyone's kind of united, which is what's meant to happen. Like, so their version of the Dark Lord gets destroyed, so the world starts to grow back. So, really simple things. If you're gonna have a film about orcs are kind of they're like in so many mythology. It's not just from Lord of the Rings.
It's just fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're from a fantasy realms.
But I would say when you think of orcs, you kind of think of trolls and stuff. If I was them, instead of making them like into rap music and like hip hop, I would have made them more like German metalheads.
Absolutely, which they kind of do in the movie, and then they completely undermine it. Yeah,
very vaguely. But I would have made them basically like goths, because it's the Dark Lord as well. It's like Satans, and so you would have had them all in dark clothes, dressed like how we dressed in the 90s with like chains and stuff. Like that's the route I would have gone with the orcs.
Yeah, that's the problem with the movie. Just a sort of is the movie essentially just takes like modern LA or wherever they are, and instead of black people, they're now orcs. Instead of wealthy people, they're now elves. But it's the same world. There's nothing different about LA in Bright and LA in End of Watch. But there's no nuance to how would society look if you had whole races of like orcs and elves and dwarves
and these people
stuff.
wouldn't be able to mate with each other. So this isn't the world we're living in now, where racism is just like a surface hate, because we're all still humans. This is
completely
100%.
different.
So I would argue that humans wouldn't have racism among them.
No,
like, obviously they'd have prejudice and just from the way all like people are.
Yeah.
But I don't think you would have. I think we would be seen as human, because I think when people are put into groups, they're the opposite. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole idea, isn't it, that they always say, well, there wouldn't be any racism, or there would be no countries on Earth if we were attacked by aliens, because then we'd be like, well, we're all Earthlings against the aliens. And I think that would probably be the same. You people would be like, well, we're all humans, they're orcs, they are actually something different, and they probably want to control the world, so it's us against them.
The other thing that gets brought up in Bright is that orcs. So I reckon we have to use some of the same rules that they do. So orcs have an incredible sense of smell, which you don't work out until the end of the film. So I think like the orc part of town, you could go two ways. You could either make it really disgustingly smelly because they love disgusting smells, a bit like Oscar the Grouch in Sesame Street. Like, he loves disgusting smells.
And dogs, dogs like things which smell badly, don't they?
Yeah, because they roll in dead things. So maybe they'd wear a lot of carcasses and stuff, like, not necessarily things they killed, just like...
Yeah.
Or you could go the other way, and they could be like goths, but super clean, which would be quite funny.
Yeah, because they're obsessed with smells.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that would be interesting, because you're like, okay, that's interesting. So, like, the ghetto part of town would be the cleanest, because they're obsessed with cleanliness. Because they have a really good sense of smell.
I think you'd have to go the other way, wouldn't you? Because it's too hard to imagine.
Yeah, and I suppose like in all the references we've seen, orcs live, in this sort of filthy, grimy caves and things. So you'd have to go that way with it. But that would be interesting in itself. It's like, well, okay, so orcs like to live in filth. They wouldn't be able to live in the cities with humans because there would be all sorts of issues with that, sanitation-wise. Just general health and public health. They said, well, maybe orcs do like to wear like rotting carcasses and things because they like that smell.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to have rotting carcasses in the same living space as humans, or so there would be that issue where maybe humans and orcs could never live together because of that. And maybe you'd have a city and have a river through it, and orcs would live one side of the river and humans would in the other, and never the twain shall meet.
And maybe nose plugs would be like a main feature of people's outfits. if they had to go to that part of town.
Yeah, they wear suits. If you go into the thing, you'd have to wear like biohazard suits to go into the orc parts of town.
Yeah, just because you know the way people wear sunglasses if the sun's too bright. Well, if they're going past that area of town, it would be like, oh, this smells bad, but it would be such a part of life.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be... Well, okay, well, I'm going to make a massive, massive, massive change to this film. If we're basing this on... Let's just keep saying Lord of the Rings. Like, Lord of the Rings. None of them have ships or boats. They have magic. So a lot of the problems with like scarcity and stuff isn't necessarily a problem. And yet we're set in LA, on the shores of America. This needs to be set in the mountains. And I think cities would have evolved from mountains areas.
Okay, why
well, because like orcs live in caves.
Yeah.
Elves live up high in like waterfalls and stuff.
What? They live in the forest.
I don't know.
They're forest folk.
Forest, yeah, there you go.
They're woodland folk.
Yeah, you've got like woodland creatures, and then you've also got like goblins that live in stone mountains and things. And you've got centaurs that can fly everywhere, so they don't.
Yeah.
Not centaurs can't fly.
No, but I know what
That's
you
what
mean.
Pegasus.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
A city evolves in the human world because we had ships that went back and forward.
Yeah, the limitations of our transportation abilities or whatever, whereas if you can fly.
So I think as long as there's a river, we'd evolve more like Austria and Germany, and we'd be more around mountainous areas with streams and stuff.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's weird.
I can see what you're saying.
So like the centre of America would probably be where the redwoods were or something.
I think it's kind of... This sort of defeats the object of this discussion a little bit, but I think they're all so different that it would be like Lord of the Rings, where you'd have countries and where people would live. I don't think there would be much crossover because it's just so difficult, because humans, orcs and elves live such different lives, and that's the whole point of the fantasy realm, isn't it? It's like you have the mountains where the dwarves live, you have like the volcanic dead sort of land, which is where the orcs live, you have the woods and things where the elves live.
There'd probably be one place where they did all come together though, so I don't mind looking at that
which is
world.
if you look at that city, say there's a city at the crossroads of all these countries, they live, there's like the world sort of split up, and they've got some massive city in the middle, which is where everyone comes to meet, that would be interesting. It wouldn't look like modern LA in any way.
No, nobody. And even if you took any of those races and you decided they were in charge of what it looked like, it would never look like LA. The one I would say in this film they got the closest was the elves. Because from what we know about elves, they can live for... We don't even know how long elves could live, like in Lord of the Rings. They can live forever. Yeah. They have a lot of wealth just because they liked gold and stuff, and they were very organised, more powerful. And if you live for a long time, you're going to be rich.
I think that's just it, isn't it? They just they live in the forest. They don't really covet gold or possessions, but they've just lived for so long, and if you were gonna model them on anybody who exists, any sort of subculture or group of people that exists now,
Japanese
in the but no, I don't think so, because
I would have gone Japanese.
In the movie they're all driving Ferraris and they're all bankers. I think they would all be like English gentry was what they'd be. They'd all live in country houses and castles because they've lived for 1,000 years. They'd all be like big landowners and stuff like that out in the country, living in mansions and stuff. They'd be like lords.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. I think you could go. That's quite interesting. See, this is why I love world building, because I feel like you could approach it from either way. And yeah, obviously you could approach it the way they did, but it was stupid.
It was dumb. It was just completely. It was so lazy, and they put no thought into it at all. They were like, let's just do modern world, and instead of them being bankers, they're going to be elves.
But like that would have been cool if they would really sophisticated English type. I loved that. That would have been so interesting. But I think the way I was thinking of it was because Japan is such a strong culture, but they're also really forward with their technology. I feel like you could take more of that kind of mix where they have really advanced machines doing everything for them. Because elves don't necessarily have magic, do they? But they live for a long time, so they're going to be so intelligent that they can really quickly grasp concepts and make things. So I think that they should have been in ultra high rises. higher buildings than we could even possibly imagine right now, like towering up into the clouds. And they should have been really obsessed with like the way you shake hands, the way you say hello, all of the kind of ways that the Japanese have really unique ways of doing things.
I see what you mean.
So like had a very special greeting that they gave to each other, and like a very special order that you do things, and you really respect your elders because everyone's old. So if someone's older than you, they're even wiser.
Yeah.
So I think you could combine both what we're both saying. Though. You could like do it.
No, I think that's like, and you know, to be fair to Bright, although it's I don't want to be fair to him, but it's you see the elves for like literally a minute, don't you? If that, and you're like,
this is my other problem.
But that's a problem in itself.
This is my other problem: is that if you've got this world, why wouldn't you show me it?
I don't know.
Oh, but if it makes you feel better, they're making a second one.
Oh, are they? Brilliant, because the first one was such a barnstormer.
But hopefully, because everyone's saying exactly what we're saying, I'm hoping that he's gonna do these things. Like, I want to see the world that you're gonna.
But they've kind of painted themselves into a corner now because it doesn't make sense. The story doesn't make sense. It's just lazy. I think that's what offends me the most about the movie. It's just so lazy.
The big thing that annoyed me about this film was that there's no goblins, and I feel like dwarfs. Dwarfs should have been a huge part of this, and they should have been the bankers. Like in Harry Potter. Harry Potter does what this film doesn't. I feel like Harry Potter is a better idea of what a Lord of the Rings world would evolve into.
Yeah.
Like, dwarfs would be... They'd hoard all the gold, so they would be the ones that started loaning you money and stuff.
Of course, they'd be the bankers of this world.
So you'd get... I think they'd have grown a bit, but you'd still get a huge population of really short people that would all live, like, around together... More so, they'd probably spread around a bit because they're very strong as well, so they can defend themselves. You'd probably get them living closer to the orc world because they also live in caves and stuff, so they would evolve living in similar areas.
Yeah,
But
and the dwarves love money and gold, so they would be they'd probably be the people who would, wherever you go, you'll always find a dwarf. I imagine.
Do you think as well that they would use orcs because they're stupid as their bodyguards almost?
Yeah, maybe.
And they'd lend them money. So the orcs would want the money, the dwarfs would need the protection.
Yeah.
So you'd get an orc dwarf. Orc dwarf.
A dork.
would be very, almost have a symbiotic relationship by this time in history. So they would actually be quite intertwined.
And it does make sense as well. Like, the thing in fantasy is that dwarves and elves hate each other, right? That's the running theme. It would make perfect sense in this if you transported that to the modern times, because dwarves would all be about money and banking and finance, which is new money, and the elves would be old money. They're all the old landowners and the lords and the gentry. It's the new money, old money sort of friction.
This would be so. Oh my god, this would be so interesting. We don't need a stupid cop story because what we're looking at is like such an interesting world where the old power of the elves is starting to be taken over because the dwarfs are actually getting enough money to gain the technology that the humans have and the elves have made, and they're also stronger now, so the shifting power is starting to happen. Yeah,
that's it. And you could have a situation whereby the elves hate the dwarves because they're replacing them. You know, they used to have all the power as the landed gentry, and now they're being replaced by the financiers, the bankers. Humans would hate the bankers because, you know, as everybody, you know, it's the thing to these days, isn't it, to hate the bankers? So then the dwarves would be hated by everybody, and the dwarves would maybe then be like, well, if the humans and the elves hate us, let's start using our money to recruit the orcs because we need somebody on our side. We'll side with the orcs.
And again, though, like, there's just one scene in Bright, centaur walking in the back. There's centaurs in this world. That changes everything. You can't just throw one in the back and like, there you go, here I am.
Yeah.
Because they would need to live where horses live, so they'd want to probably run a lot around these horsemen, and horsewomen. There's so much
to it. Yeah, the centaurs. So how do people feel about centaurs then? Like,
are they more human?
Is there discrimination against centaurs like there is against orcs? Because the movie implies that there's discrimination against orcs. But Will Smith gets on his little high horse, no pun intended, and starts saying about, like, we shouldn't discriminate against orcs, they're just like us. And you're like, but So what about so what they're saying is this discrimination is just completely frivolous. It's just people like, you're different from me. So do centaurs have that same discrimination? And if it's not just a frivolous surface level bias, if people dislike the orcs because they joined the Dark Lord, isn't that legitimate? Isn't that fair?
Do you think you get a situation where like so if centaurs exist, we can kind of guess that horses exist, and they were probably the main way of people getting around for a long time.
Yeah.
As they were back in.
Is
in
riding a
Missouri.
centaur racist?
Can a centaur sleep with a horse? Is that bestiality?
Is it still bestiality?
Is it bestiality? Can they all marry each other? Can an elf marry a human? And can a human marry a dwarf?
How do centaurs? If there's you, sorry, I can't.
You're stuck on something.
Did humans bang horses to make centaurs?
I don't know, but I'm going to say 100%.
Oh, did a horse? Is that what that video on the internet was? Was that the beginnings of centaurs?
Creation of a centaur.
Yeah. So, what happened there?
It's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah, that's right. Is there interbreeding between these different mythical races? Can you have a half orc, half dwarf? Can you have a half elf, half dwarf? Is all this possible?
The more we talk about this, I'm just realizing this is Harry Potter. Because what would happen in this world is that humans would cling onto their magic because it was the main thing we had. So everyone would be taught magic.
But we're not magic, are we, in fantasy? I know in Harry Potter we are, but in Lord of the Rings, humans don't have magic, do they?
Yeah, but you can become a wizard, can't you?
Can you? Gandalf's not.
I don't know. It's
Gandalf's
very
not.
unclear.
Yeah, Gandalf's not a human though, is he? Like,
Yeah, he is.
No, he's not. He's an elf. Like
Gandalf's an elf.
Yeah, well, he's not. You know, like in in Lord of the Rings, they have like they're not called elves, but they're called like everyone who's listening who actually knows Lord of the Rings is going to be like pulling their hair out at this conversation. But yeah, for him, the five is him. There's Saruman. There's the other one which has the bird crap on his head, Gryffindor. They're all like sent to Earth by the gods, like to protect. Not Earth, Middle Earth, to protect them.
Oh, okay. So we've got a wizard dictator in this world.
Basically, yeah. There's like a god, isn't there?
No, but what I mean is the president of this world would be a wizard.
There'd be five, like Gandalf and Saruman and all them would just exist.
Okay,
be wandering
so they'd
around.
be like world leaders then.
Yeah, you'd think so. Maybe they kind of be like the Pope, I suppose, in the sense that they'd have power, but it would be soft power. They wouldn't actually have armies and stuff.
I'd like to say, oh yeah, and it would fade away and it would become more like our world and people would be like, does it exist? I don't know. But that's different because magic, if you could prove magic existed, if every Christmas the Pope came out and made 1,000 loaves and fishes appear in the air, like I'd be like, I'm going to church.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, it's real. This is real.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, there's so much scope for it to be interesting.
But
and they didn't make it interesting.
Even the tiniest things for me are unforgivable. Costume design,
Awful.
Police uniform. Why is a police uniform the same?
Oh, I know.
Buildings, architecture. If you got given, I'm not a designer or a concept designer or something, but if I was given a project like this, oh my god, I bet they lost their minds. I bet they were like, this is going to be the most exciting thing. I'm going to design everything. Guns going to look different. Clothes are going to look different. Street signs are going to be different. And yet, it's all the bloody same.
It looks exactly the same.
I would have got the idea that it was the same world if everything had looked slightly different. They didn't need me to... Yeah,
it didn't all have to look like, medieval. It could have looked modern while also looking different. You could... If you gave to a concept designer and said, okay, this is what, elven stuff looks like. It looks kind of slightly Celtic and kind of, woodlandy. But imagine it's been dragged into the 21st century. What do you think? What aspects of that would they have kept? What aspects would they have dropped? And a concept designer would have been able to come up with some amazing things.
Yeah.
Instead, they were like, it just looks exactly the same as modern. What?
I think as well, it's hard, isn't it? It's so hard to predict because, humans have evolved together. But, everything changes. You can't look at any part of human history. I suppose that I would have gone back to Nordic times and had a look at how the Scandinavian countries have evolved. I would have made LA look more like Scandinavia.
Hmm.
Or like Alaska or something, I would have looked at how they'd evolved a bit more than how we did.
Yeah. You
Imagine Scandinavia mixed with Japan. That's probably how I would have gone with this world.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so much you can do with it. It just seems to be like, and I know maybe they're saying, well, we're going outside the scope. This is supposed to be about 2 police officers on their beat. It's end of watch.
Films don't work like that when they're about stuff like this.
Yeah, it just feels like there's so much more they could have explored with it. Like the orcs could be, dirty and stupid, but the fact that they live, in volcanic areas and stuff, that they use geothermal energy or something, so they don't have any issues with like. They don't have oil or petrol. They just don't have any sorts of things like that. Or maybe there's just all sorts of things you could do based on that. Like the elves could be like super environmentalists because they want to protect the forests and stuff. So they're like super. You could have elf like terrorism or something with environmental terrorism because they want to protect the forests and stuff.
That would be quite cool with the orcs because they're so collectivist. Because like they'd all live on top of each other just because that's how it's always been. You'd have like really crammed transports and stuff. Like it wouldn't be anything. Nothing would be built for comfort.
Yeah, that's right.
And they'd all walk really close to each other and close to you. They would have no idea of personal space. That would have been quite funny to have like.
And maybe because they're stupid, they're sort of slightly backward. Maybe that makes them hostile to technology and to the modern world. And maybe the elves would, because they're obsessed with the environment and with nature, would be environmentalists. Maybe that would have common cause. Somehow there'd be this common cause between orcs and elves that's never existed. They've always been like mortal enemies. But in the modern world, the elves and the orcs find common ground in this, antipathy towards technology. And that could be interesting, like angle. You could be like, oh, what's going on here? And the humans and the dwarves, or the humans could be like, what's going on here? Like the elves and the orcs are starting to collaborate and they're working together against us because humans are all about technology and they're destroying the environment or something. If you wanted to make an environmental morality play. I know we're concentrating on the orcs a lot, but I suppose you saw them the most in this film. But like, say orcs had an amazing sense of smell. If I was this film, I would have pushed that to like as far as you can imagine. So they make incredible chefs. Because they've got like the most finely tuned palate. So you've got this world where they live in a horrible area and stuff, but they eat incredible food. Yeah. Because their sense of smell is so good. But also, they make great doctors because they can smell tumours. Like dogs. Like the dogs
can
smell
tumours and stuff. Yeah. And that's, I don't know.
But yeah, you could go into the thing of like, this society, what roles would be dominated by orcs? And you could say like professional sport would be dominated by orcs because they're just physical specimens.
Yeah, but when would you have a sport where 2 races who would compete against each other?
Yeah, maybe
not races is the wrong word because they're not humans. They're different species. It's
interspecies sport. But then maybe that's a thing. Maybe it's like it's really popular to have. There isn't a human sport anymore. It's all just watching orcs. It's like, because they're the best. You like orc boxing and orc football and orc whatever, orc rugby. But then maybe there's other roles. And so maybe they dominate the army. Like if you've got one country, the army is dominated by the orcs, which makes them...
I'm starting to think the orcs would take over.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. Maybe that could be a concern of the humans. Is like, well, our army is dominated by orcs. We could have a coup d'etat where the army takes over the country because it's dominated by the orcs, which makes people very uncomfortable with orcs or suspicious of orcs because they have all these positions of power because that's what they specialize in. And it's like this, you could make that so interesting, all these different concerns people have and how the different races dominate different jobs and professions, and it's like, that could be interesting, but it doesn't do any of that in this movie. It's just... there's nothing. You don't see any of the different races. Everyone's human.
Everyone speaks English as well, and I think you'd have a unique language.
Well, they do. Well, the elves do speak a funny language, don't they? Remember?
Elves would speak all languages because they've lived long enough. They can pretty much do whatever they want. Yeah. And I suppose you can look at like to look at orcs, I would look at like the Renaissance period. Where people had more time than worries.
Yeah.
So I think they'd all be artists, maybe. I know we went the technology route, but you could go another way where they're all like almost hippies. Elves are just kind of like they get to a point where nothing matters and they just want to live free and like so they'd all just be like in like multiple relationships, just out getting drunk every night because they've lived forever, they can do what they want. So you'd actually find that maybe all the drug addicts and stuff would be all the elves. So you could have two elf worlds, one where everybody's kind of business like we were saying, but then as you get older, because you're not aging, once you get to like your 100th birthday, you go off the rails.
Yeah, well, that's maybe...
And you become like drug addicts.
Well, that'd be a good twist on it if you had like, well, elves are immortal, they've lived forever, they have these things, so they just do things which are completely frivolous. You know, like the elves dominate things like the arts. You know, they're actors and singers and dancers.
Their fashions would be crazy.
Yeah, and they do all that sort of stuff.
Weird shit.
But they don't actually contribute much to society anymore because they don't become engineers or doctors. Because why do they become doctors? Because to them, there's no need to be a doctor. And, you know, our lives would be so insignificant to them because they're like, well, I'm immortal and you're just a mere mortal. You just come and go, so I have no sort of feelings for you.
But as soon as weapons would have been brought into it, they wouldn't have known how to handle it because they'd have no doctors.
Yeah.
So maybe the elf population would actually be quite diminished.
Yeah, there wouldn't be many of them left, and they're very sort of... Yeah, maybe they are just hippies. They live on communes. They don't
selfish.
They don't contribute anything to any of the society. So maybe people hate elves more because they're just like, oh, these people are just wasters. They don't do anything. And to them, they're like, what's the point? You know, I've lived for 1,000 years.
Wouldn't that
all
be
your stuff doesn't matter to me.
Because when we're talking through this, what's actually happening is the orcs are the ones that are in charge of the world. They've become more and more intelligent through every generation. They've become the doctors and the ones in charge. The elves have left over their technology they've invented, but have got frivolous and the who cares attitude, basically like their midlife crises, and have gone off the rails. So now they've become dependent on the drugs that the dwarfs and the humans are making for them. That would be a really interesting world where orcs, because it's so easy to put elves at the top. So this would be really interesting.
And if you wanted to make, like, if you know, he was obviously trying to make a political statement, and it was just really lame. But like, you know, it's sort of this is kind of a twist on the patriarchy idea, isn't it? It's like, well, men are physically stronger, so men have got these positions of power. And in this world, orcs are physically stronger, so orcs dominate these positions of power, even though they're you know, arguably not as intelligent, and they're not that they have physical strength, and that's given them all these positions of power. And maybe those positions of power are under threat now, from other races.
How would you feel as a human if there are people on this earth that look a bit like you but can live forever? You would hate elves.
Yeah,
you would hate them.
You'd have a problem with them, wouldn't you? You'd just be like, especially if you didn't see them doing anything productive and stuff, and you know, and if we'd be essentially as important to them as a fly is to us. Our lives would be fleeting, so they'd have no interest in us, and we'd be thinking, you've got immortality and you're not doing anything to help. You're not contributing to society.
How does policing work? If you kill an elf, is it much worse because they could have lived forever?
You could make that point, couldn't you? You could make that argument.
Or if you kill a human, it's much worse because they didn't.
Because they weren't going to live forever. They only had what they had. Yeah. That's a good point.
I like this film that we're inventing.
Surely be better than fucking Bright.
Not so bright.
Oh, God. So... But the irony of a film called Bright being so extremely dull.
But isn't it just like, this is all I want? If you're writing a film right now, just sit around with some wine and have a really long, stupid conversation about it and see if you come up with some weird ideas.
Don't just remake the last movie you made. Don't do that. Don't cast Will Smith.
Oh, Lee is the only person in the world that has a problem with Will Smith.
Oh.
I don't know where the hate comes from.
I hate him.
I think you're jealous.
Everything you cut that I said about Michael Bay, times it by 10, is what I think about Will Smith.
But in West Philadelphia, he was born and raised.
God.
Do you know where he spent most of his days?
Oh. I wish he spent most of his days in hospital. That's what I wish.
I think that might be some kind of modern day sacrilege. You saying that?
Yeah, I know. That's it. I don't follow the crowd. Everyone's just been. You've all been taken in by his
charm, good looks, and
his
wit.
Hitlerian speeches. That's all it is. That's all that's been taken in.
Okay, I think that like we have not touched the surface on this, and I feel like me and you are going to talk about this for weeks. But
and there's only 7 minutes until the rugby's on.
I know that's
so.
the other important thing.
Yeah.
So, would you live in this world that we've created, the bright world, or would you live in our world? Be more interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know. It depends. I mean, we've created about 3 different worlds there. Like one where the elves run it, one where the dwarves run it, one where the orcs run it.
Yeah, but all of those would be better films than Bright.
Yes,
and that takes me a lot to say that because I am not a film writer. I do not even think I could write a film. But he was paid to do it.
Yeah. And again, I get this. I know people can be like, but it's a movie about 2 cops. It's essentially a buddy cop movie.
Yeah, but he made like 6 buddy cop movies, so we didn't have to do another one.
I just feel like, yes, I get it. It's, they couldn't explore all of these points in this show, in this movie. But then I'd say, why make the movie? End of Watch made the same points, did it better. Why make the movie to begin with?
I think that if he wanted to make... If somebody said, Netflix or whatever, said to him, you're only getting this money for this film if you write us a film about an orc cop that is with a human.
And the human has to be Will Smith.
But I still think you could have written a more insightful, interesting film with better world building. Definitely.
Like, just the fact that they were like, let's make this buddy cop movie, a human and an orc, go. It was... just doing a typical the orc is the black guy movie, so it's just a story about black and white. It's about white race and black race.
Yeah.
Just doing that is terrible.
I don't want to be like... I don't want to defame. Is it defame? I don't want to defame this film, but I feel like if I'd stuck a pen up my butt and then like leaned over and then just written on some paper, I could have written a better film.
Would have been better than this. Yeah. And it didn't help.
And less racist.
Yeah.
This film is very racist.
It's kind of racist. Because it's kind of saying, well, black people are in league with the Dark Lords. You're like, what?
It's so bad.
I don't get it.
And for some reason, everyone hates Mexicans. Why would you hate Mexicans in a world with all these different species?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Why does anyone hate Mexicans anyway?
Oh, they are lazy people.
Okay, so would you rather live in our world of Bright?
Yeah.
Or last week's world where everyone looked the same?
Oh, I think the Bright world. Not the Bright world. I think the 21st century fantasy world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a better word for it. And I was going to say, what film is this most likely? It's not like Bright, because that's a peel of shit.
Yeah, not
peel
at all.
Of shit?
A
that's
peel
a piece
of shit.
It's
a peel of shit.
Is it a dystopia, Midtopia, or Utopia?
The Bright world is a dystopia.
Agreed.
R1, Midtopia, I think.
We've got to make these funny. Otherwise, we have to change the category to dull podcast. We're Bright. We're the podcast version of Bright. This could be a great idea, and we're ruining it.
Oh, really? Oh, jeez.
Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.
2 dystopias.
2 dystopias. Cheers.
Cheers.